Hybrid, I hope. The remote interpretation has come to stay. It offers too many advantages for all agents, clients, performers, speakers, etc., in addition to economic advantages. There will be a conditional interpretation, but I think it will be a luxury service, as something exclusive. I also believe that to survive as face-to-face interpreters, interpreters must convince and seduce customers to convince them of the benefits of the conditional interpretation. Invisibility in the cabin does not play in favor of face-to-face interpreters. They must work even more outside the cabin than inside.
I think the future of the profession will be definitely hybrid. In general, I think that our work will be face-to-face for large international conferences with a large number of attendees and remote for events and meetings of lower size. The pandemic showed the advantages, reduction of the carbon footprint, time and money savings, among others, that the virtual world entails. However, it has also been shown that many events are not suitable for virtual support, either because of its influx or because it would benefit more from face-to-face exchange. In short, I believe that the future of the profession will be hybrid with a clear preference towards the virtual.
I definitely think the immediate future of the profession is hybrid. Now that the pandemic has shown us the many advantages of allowing remote participation at conferences, the way is now paved for hybrid participation, offering the best of both worlds. Those who can attend conferences in person will enjoy the advantages of face-to-face meetings, while those who cannot, for whatever reason, not only health, travel costs, time restrictions, a tight schedule, etc., can make the most of the time they have available to take part in relevant meetings by giving a presentation, providing Q&A input, or simply greeting attendees. RSI has contributed to meetings being convened with much shorter notice than before, sometimes even being convened on the same day. Meetings tend to be shorter due to concentration span being greatly reduced in online meetings. Interpreters also find the online work more tiring due to all the stimuli and distractions and generally poor quality sound. I believe that meetings will be increasingly hybrid in the future as customers are able to make huge savings by saving on travel, accommodation and time. In fact, it would seem that Europe will finally catch up with Latin America and the USA in the sense that they have been using RSI for some time now, even well before the pandemic, due to long distances. I see a hybrid future, in the image of meetings and meetings in the work environment in general. The remote interpretation has proven to be very practical for these meetings that, in any case, are being held at a distance, with cost savings, displacements, less pollution, etc., which supposes. However, I believe that face-to-face meetings are still necessary, perhaps not as much as before, but contact is inherent in the human being and favors social relations, learning, exchanges, business agreements. We can also listen to music in virtual reality environments, but I do not think the concepts live. With the interpretation in face-to-face congresses, I imagine it a bit the same. Hybrid. I am a simultaneous interpreter, and during the pandemic I thought that the remote modality had come to stay. I thought that, once the organizers of the congresses realized that the remote is more advantageous, in the first place, by ecology, by avoiding carbon emissions, and secondly, by economy, when saving our diets and transportation, they were not going to want to pay our tickets and the interpreters were going to be avoided forever to the remote, even if the congresses return in person. In fact, in the year 2020 I even proposed the teaching guide of the subject of simultaneous interpretation in the UMA, where I teach some years, to teach the students the remote modality specifically and thus adapt the teaching of the profession to which they would bring the future of the labor market. But the year 2022 has not proved me right. Little by little, and in my experience, the congresses have left the remote and counting on us again. Even my United Kingdom clients, for those who during the pandemic I interpreted remotely, this year I have paid me plane tickets and stays to work in the congresses in person. So I believe that the immediate future will be a mixture of everything a bit. There will be organizational, economic or logistics circumstances that prevent the interpreters in person at the congresses, because they have noticed that this expense can be saved, because there is no room in the room to install cabins, because half of the public will attend online, because the speakers are in streaming and think that the interpreters should also be, because they are environmentalists, etc., and there will be other circumstances that require the interpreters in person, because a scenario must be observed, because it is important of the remote modality, etc., so it is difficult to opt for the face-to-face or remote mode. The important thing, in my opinion, is not to change the rate depending on the modality, since we would be sending a wrong message. I am convinced that the immediate future of simultaneous translation will be hybrid. The arrival of the remote opens more work possibilities and is here to stay. I see the world of simultaneous interpretation as a hybrid space in which large face-to-face events will be held online conferences. The great inconvenience of the remote is that the interpreter works isolated, does not have direct contact with the organizer, the attendees or the technicians. In addition, the sound and image quality of the events online leaves much to be desired, because we are at the mercy of the technical team of the speakers, which is usually very poor. The interpreters are required to headphones and a maximum quality microphone, but the speakers are allowed to connect with anything. This has an impact on the quality of the interpreter's work, in addition to his hearing health. Even so, I am in favor of the remote format for small conferences.
Firstly, thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. The people in charge of organizing conferences are under a lot of pressure to get it right and to deliver a top-quality interpreting service at the lowest possible cost. Therefore, I believe that interpreters who are specialized in certain niche markets will be the ones to benefit from the comfort of their very well-connected homes. The key is guaranteeing a secure, high-quality, uninterrupted internet connection at both ends. Another advantage of remote interpreting is that the interpreters are not confined to a booth, sitting down at a desk, Roman galley style, but are free to move around without fear of detracting attention from the speaker, or distracting their partner. As the case of online language teaching has proven, competition is now effectively, albeit not very efficiently, global. So, I believe there will always be a call for on-site interpreters, but that there will be a move to universalize the remote service and target specialists who have chosen low-cost territories and regions to live in. The higher the quality of life, the lower the cost of living, the lower the rates. There is also another aspect which will influence conference interpreting, and that is the advent of deeper type interpreting and instantaneous translating. It hasn't started on a large scale yet, but the effective discrimination towards hearing and or visually impaired conference goers or online spectators will become an issue in the not too distant future. How long will it take for interpreting software to replace flesh and blood interpreters? All it requires is for the organizers to insist on speakers sticking to a series of guidelines, providing the scripts of what they intend to say together with their presentations, and the days of human interpreters may be numbered. Therefore, I believe that if we wish to continue providing the service we have been up to now, we must adapt and find a way to make ourselves as.
I believe that each of us, interpreters, will have its future, and explain myself. Some will make more remote, others will return to the face-to-face to 90%. Of course, the combination should be seen, because I can only talk about the Russian market. My opinion is that the remote interpretation will remain as a valid option, but low cost for last-minute meetings and customers that have a very limited budget, individuals, owners, meetings between teams, and are not complicated. Or for those companies that due to their circumstances have to reach the public in another country that cannot travel, as is now the case of Russia. On the contrary, the conditional interpretation will continue to be a preferred option for large companies or organisms, and for those individuals whose status requires a certain degree of prestige, it is to have a personal interpreter. The congresses are more full than ever, and it is seen that even having an option to follow online, being able, people prefer to travel. I think it is totally normal, since we are specialists rather in human communication, not so much in information exchange. The remote is very basic, and it is a mistake to think that with listening to a presentation and recording from home will bring you the same as going to another country, talking to your colleagues, asking questions, networking, establishing new contacts, etc. It is as if in school my son limited himself to reading the books corresponding to his subjects, only in the library, without the teacher or his classmates, without recreation and his midday sandwich. It is studied the same, but the same is not learned. Besides, we all know how many matters of great importance are decided during an informal dinner, without witnesses. I doubt that technology can compete with a meeting in person in everything that is confidentiality.
The future of remote interpretation is not future but present. Before the pandemic, there were already some RSI platforms, such as Kudo, Ablio, Glosenti, etc. However, the confinement made the MICE sector so affected by the restrictions that the only option to work was to use these platforms. It is true that at that time there was a lot of stir and it was thought that working conditions would be affected. Some malicious agencies began to raise time rates, but the interpreters organized and defended some standards that, for the moment, have made the conditions not worsened. In fact, and this is personal, I see the RSI as an open door to more job opportunities. First, because it doesn't matter if you are not in the same city as the event to work. Afterwards, there is also the fact of being able to have, for example, a half-morning day and a mini-live in the afternoon, something that, due to schedules, in case of being face-to-face, would be very complex on many occasions. And, finally and not less importantly, the popularization of Zoom, and its easy and intuitive use by customers directly, and their incorporation of the function of the relay makes many companies/clients that in another case does not they would have resorted to interpretation due to lack of knowledge now they are launched to the pool. I believe, therefore, that the RSI is an ally and that little by little behavioral errors are corrected, which, unfortunate of the speakers.
I consider that, in the short term, we will continue to move in a hybrid environment. The boom that experienced the use of online platforms for meetings and even congresses has not been a passenger, but has penetrated numerous professional environments until it becomes the most common in some cases. Therefore, they are inevitably followed and remote simultaneous interpretation services, ISR, will continue to be demanded. I think that despite its numerous inconveniences, especially for the interpreters, the ISR has expanded the horizons of the interpretation of conferences as we knew it. The reduction of the costs in the organization of the event, in the technical media and in the accommodation and displacement of the participants has allowed ISR services to be available in events in which it would not have been contemplated before. However, I believe that the immediate future will follow the trend we are experiencing in the present, a gradual increase in face-to-face. Starting with the institutions that have traditionally had interpreter templates, little by little we have lived a return to the face-to-face of congresses and meetings. I believe that some events are not conceived, at least for the moment, without the creation of relationships and the energy that only allows face-to-face. In multilingual environments, the conditional interpretation services will continue to be an essential element for the quality of these events. I think the future of the interpretation of conferences will be hybrid. The remote interpretation offers clear advantages for the client, savings in cabins, diets for interpreters, greater ease of finding interpreters, possibility of organizing meetings in different headquarters at the same time, greater flexibility in general and, why not, benefits for the medium ambient. I think they will live with face-to-face meetings because they create a more personal and direct link. They also offer the possibility of building relationships and contacts and facilitating interaction with the public.
In my opinion, the remote interpretation is here to stay, at least in the most immediate present and future. The COVID-19 pandemic has served as a good asset for this modality. Without it, many meetings initially raised in face-to-face stage could not have been celebrated virtually. I believe that this contributed to its greatest acceptance by the Interiors Guild and event organizers, while helping to dissipate part of the doubts that were on their technical reliability and the manageability of the situations interpreted in remote simultaneous. That said, I believe that the use of the remote will decrease with respect to the pandemia scenario, where it was practically the only possible modality, partly due to the general desire to give back the restrictions and return to the new normality, but its use will be more widespread than on the pre-pandemic scenario, especially for meetings not exceeding the part-time. In this sense, the remote is advantageous for all. It is a time saving in the organization of events and a decrease in the costs of displacement and accommodation, reduction of the carbon footprint, savings in the rental of equipment for the presidential interpretation, etc. In addition, there are today popular video conference platforms such as Zoom that offer remote simultaneous interpretation function, which makes it easier for everyone. The hybrid scenario will be another in which I think the remote interpretation will frequently be used. I refer with hybrid to the situations in which an event is organized face-to-face, with interpretation cabins in the same place, or not, as part of the speakers or the public, but in which some lecturer/s intervenes/n remotely. I believe that this modality will be more common for those cases in which distance is an impediment to speakers or when some setback arises that prevents its presence at the scene of the event. These are in the pre-pandemic stage impossible participation, however now with the video conference platforms and the possibilities that the remote is no longer an obstacle,